Okay, over the last hour, you've heard my take on both what happened in the Middle East and Mitt Romney's take on it. Let's check in with Rich Miniter. RichardMiniter.com is his website. Rich is a conservative commentator and journalist and author of his latest book, Leading from Behind. Rich, welcome to the program.
Good to be on your program, Tom.
Thanks for joining us.
I'm not a conservative commentator. I'm an independent-minded commentator, and I'm not registered with any political party.
Okay. All right. Noted. So what's your...
I can refer to you as a liberal host if you like.
I'm proud to say that. You can call me a liberal, call me a progressive. You can even call me a democratic socialist, and I will raise my hand. So where, from your perspective, what is your take on what happened? What has happened over the last 24 hours?
I thought Hillary Clinton's remarks today were spot on. We need to remember this is a small but savage group. Mm-hmm. And we need to remember, look into the details of this. I think the Republicans in Congress, some of whom are talking about today, cutting off funding to Libyan government, are making a tremendous strategic mistake. There are Libyans who risked their lives and were injured to try to protect the consulate in Benghazi. There are other Libyans who carried the dying U.S. ambassador to the hospital in a vain hope to save his life, and they did so at the risk of their own lives. And there are other Libyans who emerged out of the crowd to save other American lives. So these are people who risk their lives to save Americans.
Yeah.
We don't know the identity of the group that carried out the attack, but clearly it was organized, it was planned, it was almost certainly rehearsed, and it was funded. Somebody paid for those rockets, somebody paid for those bullets, somebody paid to train and organize those people.
Yeah.
My guess would be a foreign intelligence service that is hostile to the United States.
So you think it's probably Hezbollah coming out of Iran as opposed to Al-Qaeda?
I don't know if it's Hezbollah or some other proxy of the Iranian state, but it certainly looks like the work of Iran, of one of the 16 Iranian intelligence agencies acting through a proxy group that it is funded and has some relationship with.
Well, it's not inconceivable. My take on this is that...
It could be the Libyan Fighting Group, which is an Islamic group that had been funded by Iran in the past, that Gaddafi had imprisoned.
But whether it's funded by Iran or not, I mean, you could say the American Revolution was funded by the French, and therefore, we should be all upset about George Washington because he was a French front man. He really wasn't, even though the American Revolution was, in fact, funded by Louis the, 14th. The
Poles and the Irish and other European governments also provided funds to the U.S.
Yes,
government.
Absolutely. But my point is that my take on this is if you read the history of revolutions and look at the work of people like Thorstein Veblen and who's this guy? What was this? Crane Brinton, who suggest that what causes revolution, what causes rising up, is not when conditions are so bad people can't stand it anymore. I mean, there are entire nations all around the world where people are living on $2 a day and they're on the edge of starvation half the time, and they're not revolting. It is when the difference between how the circumstances of people's lives are right now and what they expect them to be, when that gap exceeds a certain point, that's when people revolt. And I would submit to you that when these people brought down their dictators, as Obama encouraged them to do, when he stood there with Mubarak and basically said, tear down these dictators, when he went to Egypt, that, and kicked off the Arab Spring, when these people took down Mubarak and they took down Gaddafi, they then expected, knowing that those guys had been stashing billions of dollars away, they expected that pretty soon their lives would be middle class and everything would be cool, and they would, and they're not. I mean, what's happened in both countries is that oligarchies are continuing to run them, and the poor are continuing to be poor. And so that gap between what they expected to be the outcome of their revolutions and what they actually got is huge. And, you could even argue that to a certain extent it's huge because we didn't intervene and say, okay, we're going to start building schools or something. We're going to take, 5% of the Iraqi budget and help out, help them build a middle class. If we're going to be in these countries, and if Egypt is going to be the second largest recipient of our foreign aid, and if we're going to militarily intervene in Libya as we did, then we have an obligation to help them reach those expectations or get the hell out of the area. Your thoughts on that?
Tom, with all due respect, I think you're dead wrong. I think the reason why people are attacking our embassies is not because we failed to provide a Marshall Plan for the Middle East and spend billions building schools and closing the gap between rich and poor. When you talk to ordinary Arabs in these countries, as I've done, what they are sick of, and the reason why they revolted in Arab Spring, is the corruption of the petty officials. How just to get your child into school, you would have to pay so many bribes. Just to get adequate health care, you would have to pay bribes.
Yeah, it's an entire system that is corrupt, and it's been corrupted from the oligarchs on down.
After Mubarak left, I saw an extraordinary scene in the streets of Cairo where the policeman tried to shake down a taxi cab driver, and he just brushed him away and said, "No, we're done with that."
Right.
And he drove on. It's the
but I would submit to you that those
corruption tax,
those
intervening in ordinary people's lives and making them bow before a government and pay them and pay them and pay them, and the humiliation of that, not just the money.
If you look at the countries, though, Rich,
looking for basic life.
Rich, are you filibustering me?
No, please continue.
If you look at the countries where that is the norm, I mean, 20 years ago in Mexico, I got driving down the street, going the speed limit, got stopped by a cop who demanded a $50 bribe to let me go. I mean, when you look at the countries where that kind of thing is the norm, what you find is that those petty officials are very badly paid because the system has been set up with the expectation that they will be bribed. You know, I experienced the same thing trying to get into Uganda during the war against Idi Amin in 1980 when I was, coming in from Kenya, and I kept showing up at the Ugandan embassy day after day after day, and they say, "Oh, come back tomorrow to get your visa." And finally, this old British guy at the hotel I was staying at said, "Just slip a $20 bill and you'll get it instantly." And I did, and it's because that's how these guys get paid. That's literally how they're able to pay their rent, is by bribery. And what has happened is that the autocrats, the corrupt dictators got torn down. The system didn't get reformed, and it's still like that.
Well, in Libya, first of all, they are in the process of reforming, and they've made substantial progress. The U.S. media has not been paying attention, but I think Libya is a very different situation from Egypt. And we cannot just sort of blanketly treat all Arab countries as alike. There's significant cultural and historical
there's huge differences. And in those countries where people are not experiencing...
A closer look at Libya should give Americans hope. And the fact that so many Libyans risked their lives to save American diplomats, in vain in some cases, but happily in other circumstances, they did save lives. Yeah. That should count for something.
What's your take on Mitt Romney coming out and attacking President Obama for what the Egyptian embassy released before the riots had even started, saying that was Obama's response, when in fact Obama never even knew that press release had been written or released?
Well, certainly as President of the United States, he's responsible for all the official statements of his administration, including those of the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. And so that indicates a lack of proper controls and clearance. But second of all, no amount of free speech, no odious internet video justifies violence.
No, my question is, what's your take on Mitt Romney lying about the order of events? Has he shot himself in the foot here politically?
Lied or not lied, I don't make it my business to track the campaign statements of Mitt Romney. But I can tell you that
what Romney said was that Obama's first... Rich, hang on just a second. Let me just tell you. Romney said, and he's repeated it now in a second press conference, that Obama's first response to the violence was to issue an apology, basically. And that was not the first response of the Obama administration. In fact, that was never a response of the Obama administration. That was what came out of the Egyptian embassy, the U.S. embassy in Egypt, before the riots even began. They were trying to prevent the riots.
Well, obviously they didn't succeed. Look, attacking the free speech rights of Americans as a way to forestall violence, it doesn't sound like a great strategy to me.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, and I don't think that's what they were saying. But in any case, Rich Miniter, richardminiter.com. Thanks a lot, Rich.